Prepare yourself for a cinematic journey where light and shadow intertwine in a saga of faith and power. In this epic journey, you will meet Elisha, an ordinary man who, with a sacred mantle, defied destiny and transformed the ordinary into miracles, where poisoned waters are purified, where death is conquered by the divine touch, and where kings tremble before the power of a prophet. Elisha's life seems to have been written with celestial ink, guided by a power that transcends human understanding. Imagine a hot and tedious day in the field, where sweat and dust were inseparable companions of daily work. It was in this humble setting that a simple young man, still unaware of his grand destiny, lived quietly, oblivious to the transformation that was preparing on Israel's spiritual horizon. In the heart of a land where working the fields was the daily routine, Elisha was born and grew up among rows of plowmen and laborers. The son of a family that valued tradition and the sweat of their own brow, he quietly integrated into a group of 12 workers who pulled the plow and shared the harvest tasks. His hands, calloused and firm, and his face marked by the sun of the fields, narrated the story of a life dedicated to the land. Little could he imagine that the divine touch would break the monotony of his simple life. One day, while the intense brightness of the sun punished the landscape and the sound of tools and the murmur of the earth filled the air, something extraordinary happened. A man with a profound gaze and imposing figure emerged as if invited by destiny itself. This man was none other than the prophet Elijah, known for his feats and his unmistakable way of serving the God of Israel. Fleeing from the dangers imposed by the relentless Queen Jezebel, Elijah carried with him the mission of rescuing the people of Israel in a troubled time. When Elijah's eyes rested on the young Elisha, there was no hesitation. With a gesture that seemed to echo through all ages, the prophet extended his mantle and cast it over the young man's shoulders in an unequivocal sign. From now on, he would be the bearer of the Lord's word and miracles. The mantle, a symbol of divine authority, fell like a burden of promises, marking the beginning of a transformation that would be narrated for generations. Elisha, taken by a mixture of astonishment and emotion, could barely comprehend what was happening. His heart beat with the intensity of a call that transcended time, and without losing a moment, the young man proclaimed that he first needed to bid farewell to his loved ones by saying, "Let me say goodbye to my mother and father, so that I may follow you." He made it clear that he was willing to abandon a life of simplicity in favor of a mission he had never dreamed of. Although Elijah offered enigmatic responses, that moment sealed the young man's commitment to the divine, definitively transforming his destiny. In the years that followed, Elisha lived closely with Elijah, observing and assimilating every teaching, every word spoken with authority, and every act carried out with a power that seemed magical. The learning environment was full of mysteries, the whisper of the winds casting hidden messages, and the signs from the heavens indicating that the events there were not mere accidents, but manifestations of the Lord. During long walks and intense dialogues, the disciple absorbed the lessons of faith and determination, which would prepare him to face challenges that surpassed the common reality of mortals. The day came when Elijah sensed that his earthly time was coming to an end. With the sensitivity of a master who had already fulfilled his part in history, he led Elisha to a place near the banks of the Jordan River. There, in front of the flowing waters and silent witnesses of the approaching miracle, Elijah was enveloped by a supernatural spectacle. In a moment of pure dramaticity, with lightning and a curtain of mist, the prophet was taken up to the heavens, leaving behind a mantle that gently rested on the sacred ground. Elisha, stunned, seized that symbol of the mission's transfer. Upon touching the mantle, something inside him awakened, as if the power of the Lord invaded him. He dared a gesture that would forever change the trajectory of the people of Israel. By striking the waters of the Jordan with his hands, the currents parted, allowing the passage of those who needed to cross and proving that divine power now resided in the figure of the new prophet. With Elijah's mantle in his possession, Elisha began a series of prodigies that would not only transform material reality, but also reaffirm the living presence of the God of Israel among men. Each miracle performed was a declaration of faith, a strong message that celestial intervention remained within reach of those who volunteered to follow it with fervor. In a disturbing episode, while traveling on a road leading to the city of Bethel, the prophet was mocked. Bold youths, driven by irreverence, challenged his authority by calling him Baldy. Without hesitation, Elisha turned to the scorners, and in a moment filled with gravity, pronounced a curse. Immediately, 2 bears emerged from the woods, advancing furiously on those who had insulted God's messenger. This episode, narrated with harshness and firmness, marked that day as a turning point, a reminder that respect for the divine word is non-negotiable. Another emblematic passage took place in Jericho, a city plagued by a poisoned water source and barren lands where misery spread among families. Moved by compassion, Elisha responded to the residents' plea and proclaimed the Lord's intervention. Armed only with a new bowl of salt and his unwavering conviction, he approached the source, pronouncing words of purification that hung in the air. In an almost magical instant, the contaminated water transformed into a clear liquid conducive to life, bringing relief to a community marked by desolation. Perhaps one of the most touching miracles was performed to save a family on the brink of despair. Say a widow afflicted by the imminent seizure of her children to pay off unpayable debts saw in Elisha a hope of redemption. The prophet instructed her to collect empty vessels from her neighbors, defying the laws of scarcity. Slowly, the oil that inexplicably multiplied filled all the pots, allowing the family to sell the surplus, pay off their debts, and regain their dignity. This episode, full of emotion and symbolism, demonstrated that the simple can be elevated to something extraordinary when the divine manifests. In another notable episode, Elisha blessed a hospitable woman from Shunammite, who, moved by a generous heart, sheltered the prophet whenever he passed through the city. As recognition for her kindness, God's messenger promised that she, who had not yet known the joy of motherhood, would be blessed with a child. The miracle came to pass at the exact moment, reinforcing the belief that divine intercession brings unexpected rewards to those who open their doors to the sacred messenger. However, destiny also reserved moments of trial for the family when the young son succumbed to a fatal illness. In the midst of despair and sorrow, Elisha approached cautiously, closed the door of the room where the boy lay, and with a touch of hope and authority, called for life to return. With a sigh loaded with emotion, the boy opened his eyes and death retreated, demonstrating that even at the threshold between life and death, God's power was absolute. Another unusual miracle occurred during the construction of a shelter for the prophet's disciples. While a worker was cutting a beam, the head of an axe, a borrowed and vital tool for the labor, fell into the depths of a turbulent river. The man lamented the loss as time seemed to conspire against him. But Elisha, always attentive to the details of ordinary life, approached the indicated spot, took a piece of wood, and cast it into the waters. Incredibly, the lost metal emerged from the depths, returning to the worker's hand. This episode, seemingly trivial, resonated as a powerful message that no concern is too small to be attended to by the divine touch. The charisma and power bestowed upon Elisha were not confined to the domains of everyday miracles. On numerous occasions, his influence reached royal halls, emerging as an advisor and guide for the rulers of Israel and even for leaders of neighboring nations. Amid intrigues and battles that shaped the destiny of the chosen people, the prophet played a decisive role, marking history with his unparalleled intervention. Once, 3 kings of Israel, Judah, and Edom faced the specter of a relentless enemy, the Moabites. In a juncture of anguish and uncertainty, where water scarcity threatened the survival of the armies, Elisha was called to offer his guidance. With the serenity of one who possesses a divine secret, he ordered them to dig ditches in the heart of an arid valley, even without the foreseeable guarantee of rain or wind. The next morning, the surprise was complete. An unexpected flow of water gushed from the ground, quenching not only the thirsty soldiers, but also confusing the enemy, who interpreted the phenomenon as the dripping of blood and retreated in panic. The intervention, narrated with fervor and mysticism, safeguarded numerous lives and reaffirmed the supremacy of prophetic power. Another famous event involved Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, a man whose reputation for bravery was overshadowed only by his devastating leprosy. Upon hearing through rumors and an Israelite slave about the existence of the true prophet, Naaman decided to risk his honor and health, embarking on a journey full of uncertainties and hope. With valuable gifts and a royal letter in hand, the commander arrived at Elisha's door, expecting a triumphant reception. However, against all expectations, the prophet sent a messenger with a simple instruction: "Dip yourself in the Jordan 7 times, and you will be healed." Initially, the order sounded modest for someone expecting grand rituals. Nevertheless, the servant's insistence convinced Naaman to immerse himself in the waters repeatedly. The result was astonishing. His flesh regenerated with the purity of a child, and the commander, touched by the divine sign, began to proclaim that there was no God outside of Israel. However, not even the nobility of healing prevented greed from infiltrating when Elisha's faithful servant Gehazi diverted part of the gifts. In retaliation, the prophet imposed the punishment of leprosy on the servant, demonstrating rigorously that the trust placed in the divine mission could not be betrayed. As the movement of armies and political instability surrounded neighboring kingdoms, Elisha's voice continued to echo not only in the corners of communities, but also in the courts of kings. On numerous occasions, the prophet anticipated enemy movements and warned the rulers, giving them the opportunity to escape deadly traps. In a memorable case facing threats of Syrian ambushes, his servant, overwhelmed by fear, saw the invading soldiers disappear from view upon perceiving a mirage. The presence of flaming chariots formed an invisible army to the human eye, traversing the mountains like a wall of protection. This vision, conveyed with dramatic intensity, confirmed that divine protection enveloped not only the prophet, but also the vast celestial army that watched over the people of Israel. Amid wars and sieges, there was also an episode where the fury of hunger turned the city of Samaria into a theater of desperation. Besieged by a desperate Syrian king, the city saw its resources dwindle and food prices skyrocket. In that desperate scenario, Elisha raised his voice in a bold prophecy. The next morning, fine grains would be sold for a shekel, and the price of barley would also plummet, a miracle capable of restoring hope from the city's confines. The officials' disbelief was unmatched by the impact of the outcome. Lepers fleeing to the enemy camp discovered a deserted storehouse. The Syrians had abandoned everything in a frenzy of flight, and the people of Samaria were blessed with the abrupt change of fate, a true turnaround orchestrated by the divine power embodied in Elisha. Besides his actions in war and relief in times of crisis, the prophet also played a decisive role in the transfer of royal power. When consulted by leaders who wished to know the future of their kingdoms, Elisha spared no harsh words and prophecies that outlined the fate of nations. On one occasion, he summoned a young disciple to anoint a new king, fulfilling a promise that would mark the end of a dynasty. Each anointing carried a clear message. This was the time for change. A new cycle was beginning, and under the Lord's influence, justice would prevail over the worship of false gods. Thus, with firm gestures and words full of authority, the prophet etched into the memory of men the importance of following the divine will even in the face of immense challenges. Elisha's life, marked by miracles and sovereign guidance, advanced toward its final moments with the same intensity that characterized him since his calling. In his last days, the prophet showed that the flame of the divine never extinguishes, even when the flesh weakens. Still enveloped in the aura of celestial power, he continued to intervene in critical situations, protecting his people with wise counsel and extraordinary prodigies. In one of the last manifestations of his power, when an enemy army advanced with fury to invade Israel's domains, the prophet gathered his disciples and demonstrated the hidden presence of the Lord. Amid the tension of preparations for defense, one of his servants, gripped by fear and unable to comprehend the grandeur of what was happening, finally had his eyes opened. The young man glimpsed a breathtaking scene, a myriad of celestial machines with fiery chariots and incandescent cavalries faithfully surrounded Elisha, forming an impenetrable protective shield that made the attacker lose all Courage. This vision not only strengthened the confidence of those who followed him, but also highlighted, with a touch of divine theatricality, that even in the imminence of mortality, the prophet was immortalized in the Lord's will. Despite continuous signs and miracles, Elisha's earthly time came to its serene and touching end. In the final moments of his existence, the prophet maintained the calm and firmness that always accompanied him. On his bed, surrounded by those who loved him most, and with eyes that once saw the impossible, he left a sigh filled with farewell, but not of sadness, rather of gratitude. His last breath was accompanied by a sense of mission accomplished, that every word, every gesture, and every miracle fulfilled the eternal purpose that had driven him from humble youth to the ascension as the spokesperson of the Almighty. Even after his death, Elisha's power did not dissipate, for a posthumous episode surprised everyone. During a burial ritual of a man in adverse circumstances, those present encountered an inexplicable mystery, a tomb that, when touched, released an energy so intense that it revived anyone who approached. This occurrence symbolized that the prophet's legacy, woven with the threads of faith and miracle, would continue to inspire and transform the destiny of those who dared to believe in the impossible. As we traverse the path filled with prodigies, encounters and challenges, it is impossible not to recognize that Elisha's saga transcends mere historical narrative. His story is above all a tale of unshakable faith, of courage in the face of the unknown, and of a divine power that manifests in every corner of existence. From the warm days in the field, where he was still unaware that his destiny would be intertwined with the greatness of events that would shape Israel, to the final moments when the aura of immortality was palpable, the prophet was the personification of the promise that the Lord chooses the humble to perform great deeds. Each miracle, from the thunderous parting of the Jordan waters that allowed the crossing, to the transformation of poisoned water into a life-giving source, was the materialization of a faith that challenges limits and renews hopes. His encounters with kings, often involving disputes and intrigues, demonstrated that divine power is not confined to the subtle realm of the spirit, but also imposes itself in the political arena, bringing justice and guidance to entire nations. In every anointing, in every word spoken with the authority of the Most High, the prophet reminded that the Lord's throne would never waver. And so Elisha's life unfolded as a singular epic, where each chapter, whether it was the calling that broke the silence of the fields, the teachings absorbed in the company of a master who ascended to the heavens, the miracles that defied human logic, or the encounters with sovereigns that shaped the destiny of kingdoms, intertwined to form an eternal legacy. His journey remains engraved in every stone, in every river, and even in the murmur of the wind, as a reminder that, even amid struggles and adversities, divine intervention is a constant accessible to the hearts of those who are willing to believe. Thank you for embarking on this epic journey with us and exploring the transformative life of Elisha. If you were moved by each miracle, each challenge, and each revelation, don't forget to like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on more incredible stories. Your participation keeps the flame of this divine narrative alive. Until next time.